friends. Welcome to the Creative Impact Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Caldwell, and I'm so happy you're here. Each episode, I take some time to chat with fellow artists about life, faith, and the impact of the arts.
Well, my differences are very loud and they're very obvious. My mental illness, my learning disabilities, my personality. I think everyone is different in some way or another. Mine are easily identifiable, but I think that all of us have felt different, have felt too much or not enough at some point in our life.
That's so true, yeah.
And I think especially for creatives and artists, they need to know that their differences are things that God can use and their differences are things that God will use should you let him, and they're good and they're beautiful.
Hey friends, I'd like to invite you to be part of the podcast. I'm putting together a special Thanksgiving week episode sharing your answers to the question, why are you thankful for the arts? If you haven't already, you can submit an audio clip through creativeimpactpodcast.com/thankful or email me your response to be featured on the show. I'm so excited to hear from you. Also, there's only one more week to enter our giveaway. Jaleesa from episode 18 has generously donated the Austin Stone worship album Everflow to go to one of our listeners. To enter the giveaway, subscribe to our weekly email newsletter on our website. When you go to the website, look for the right sidebar where it says Stay Connected. I'll be announcing the giveaway winner during next week's episode. Subscribe today for your chance to win. Today's guest on the show is Nathan Clarkson. Nathan is an actor, author, filmmaker, podcast host, and all-around creative person. He has a deep love for stories, which you'll hear more about, and how that's the root of all his creative endeavors. Growing up with learning disabilities and mental illness, Nathan shares how his mom, author Sally Clarkson, helped him lean into his areas of strength and encouraged his passion for storytelling. Together, Sally and Nathan co-authored the book, Different, the story of an outside-the-box kid and the mom who loved him. After receiving formal training in acting through the New York Film Academy, Nathan moved to Los Angeles to pursue a career in acting. He gained experience in TV shows and films in Hollywood and eventually started his own film company. We talk about the challenges and highlights of working in the film industry. We also chat about the creative process and what it looks like to produce a film. Nathan encourages artists to do what you can with what you have and know that you have to start somewhere. While we so often strive for perfection, Nathan reminds us that the beauty is in the process. We also talk about how Nathan recently published his first solo book called Good Man, an honest journey into discovering who men were actually created to be. You'll hear how Nathan's time in Hollywood prompted him to write this book. There are so many great words of wisdom in this conversation. May you be inspired to move forward with courage in your calling. Just as a heads up, you'll notice the audio quality changes partway into the conversation. We had some technical difficulties, but I hope you will enjoy Nathan's inspiring story regardless. Enjoy my conversation with Nathan Clarkson. Excited to get to talk with you today. It's really great that we got to connect.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, so it's super fun. It's fun how we got connected was actually through your mom, Sally Clarkson. And
oh, yeah.
I'm guessing some of the listeners know who she is as an author. And I actually heard her on a podcast like 4 or 5 years ago in a podcast interview, and then found her books and started reading. I think I started like The Life-Giving Home and a couple of her other books. And then, so she kind of got me connected up to you and hearing about your journey as an actor and in film. So I'm super excited to get to hear your story today.
Absolutely. Well, she is amazing, and she is a huge part of why I'm an actor and a filmmaker. So all the credit goes to her for connecting us and me being an actor. That's awesome.
That is so great. Well, I'd love for you to just share a little bit, like kind of the elevator pitch of who you are with our audience, and then we'll get started.
Absolutely. Well, I am Nathan Clarkson, and son of Sally Clarkson. And I am an actor, I am an author, and I'm a filmmaker. I studied acting in New York at the New York Film Academy. After that, I explored, I went to LA and started pursuing an entire life and career in acting. And for the past, maybe a decade, over a decade, really, I have been pursuing acting I have had the wonderful chance to be in TV shows and commercials and movies and kind of live out my dream. But it all kind of roots in me just loving stories. I've always loved good stories and wanted to be a part of them. And I played pretend for hours on end as a kid. And I guess when I grew up, I didn't want to stop. And so that's kind of the base of what I do and why I do it. But I just love it. Of course, it comes with its own hardships and challenges. But getting to tell and be a part of beautiful, amazing stories that touch people and reach people is really just a passion that I am so blessed to get to live out. I also recently, I guess I'm getting old. This is actually about 6 years ago, started my own film production company, and we make independent films. You've seen them on Netflix and Amazon Prime and Pureflix. All of them are deeply based and shaped around my faith, but I want to tell stories in a beautiful way that will reach people who might not hear good news and truth, but reach them in a way that they might be able to hear and connect with them. And I think movies can do that. Our movies are Confessions of a Prodigal Son, The Unlikely Good Samaritan, and we have a new one coming out called Miracle on Highway 34, which is a Christmas film, which I'm so excited about.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also write books. I actually wrote one with my mom called Different, and it was about growing up as a different kid, a creative kid, an out of the box, mentally ill, learning disabilities kid, and what that was like for both of us. And I recently came out with my first solo book called Good Man, which is just a look into who men were created to be. So that is the elevator pitch of my entire life.
That's incredible. Well, I'm excited to dive deeper into different areas of your story. And
absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for that. So first off, I guess you kind of went into it a little bit already of how you got into acting in the first place, but do you want to dive a little deeper into the beginnings and what got you passionate about it?
Yeah. So, as I said, stories have been such a part of my upbringing. They kind of shaped me. They were the thing as I was a kid that inspired me. And I did deal with a lot of mental illness and a lot of learning disabilities. And so I was very acutely aware of the things I wasn't good at very early, which sounds hard, and it was, but it's also a real blessing because that enabled me and freed me to really pursue the things I did love and that I was good at. And what I know and knew that I was good at and loved were stories. I would pretend, I would write them, I would film videos with my friends, I would be immersed in video games and movies and books, and all of these things really ignited my mind. And I love story, and it was a thing that really connected to me as a kid. And as I looked more into it, I really realized that God loves story too, that the way he shared his entire truth and message with the world was through story. The way Jesus communicated to people was through story. And so I felt that it was a real aspect of God that I could live into and something that I really loved and was good at, because I was no good at spelling or math. And so as I grew older, I really started to kind of hone those skills of acting, of writing, and be that taking classes, be that just practicing over and over and over again. So by the time it came to when I graduated high school, I told my parents, I said, I don't think I'm going to go to college. I think I'm going to go to acting school. And them being the loving, supportive parents they were, they encouraged it. And so, of course, praying the entire way and maybe just a little scared, but trusting God nonetheless. But yeah, that's where I kind of began my professional acting career. And the first thing, I tell a lot of young actors to do is go get training. And so I went to New York and I got training. And for a year, I was in acting school in a program that taught me the ins and outs of how to read a script, how to tap into characters, how to better perform and better connect and on screen. And so that was a wonderful year of learning. And when I was done with that, I was kind of ready to jump into the world, the actual world of Hollywood. And it's a scary world, and there's a lot of dark parts, and there's a lot of really hard things about it. But it is one I think that God wants to use, and I think God can use, because it's the world of stories. And so I moved out to Hollywood. I lived in a teeny apartment. So yeah, after I arrived in Hollywood, I was kind of unsure about how to go about getting into this industry, getting into movies. The dream in my head was to be in movies. And I was told by a friend, well, the first thing you need to do is go and sign up to be a background actor. And a lot of people kind of snubbed their nose at that. But I just was so ready to be on set, to be a part of what was going on, even if I was just a blur in the background. And I tell young actors still, go be an extra, be a background artist, because this is such a great way, and it was for me, to be around the people making the movies that I wanted to be, and to be around the people who were actually bringing to life the stories I loved. And through that, I was able to experience and education And it's just really fun being a background actor, I'm going to say. And so for years, that's how I paid my rent, as being a background actor. And eventually I got my first line, and eventually, way leads on to way and bigger auditions and getting to star in roles and such. But that's where I started, kind of the humble beginning. So that's kind of the origin story of how I ended up here.
Love that. Yeah. So just curious, what are some of your favorite stories from when you were growing up? Do you have like
Oh,
a
yeah.
favorite top two or three?
Oh yeah. Oh man. I'm going to be really unoriginal here because I feel like so many young boys love what I'm about to tell you. But as far as books, it was Narnia. I loved the
Yeah.
Narnia series, and there's something called the Kingdom series. I loved all these imaginative worlds and adventure. Of course, I would be remiss without saying both the book and the movie. I loved Lord of the Rings, and someday
Yeah.
I will get to carry a sword in the movie. I haven't yet, but someday that's a goal.
Yes.
But I saw that movie, I don't know, probably 50 times, and I watched all the behind the scenes, and that was one of the things that kind of solidified me knowing this is what I wanted to do, just because it's such an inspiring story, and I couldn't imagine a more fun way to spend your life and getting to exist inside this world. So Lord of the Rings, I was definitely a superhero kid. I loved Superman and Batman. One of my all-time favorite movies is The Dark Knight. I just think it's so beautiful and touching and inspiring. So those are some
Hmm.
of the, it's unoriginal because I was a little boy who loved heroes and adventure, but those are some of the stories that shaped me as a boy that ultimately kind of supported me into wanting to tell stories of my life.
That's super cool. Yeah. No, it definitely makes sense. It's okay. It's unoriginal. I think it fits. So, what was it like, I guess, pursuing acting in LA, and, what were some of maybe the challenges of being in the film industry?
Yeah. I love the world of stories, but Hollywood is very unique in some of its own challenges. And I think as I look back, and even presently as I look around at the challenges that Hollywood has, there's so many. It's hard to even decide which one is maybe the most challenging, that's most effective in my life. But I'll mention a few. One, I think the challenges I faced just right off the bat when I got there was comparison.
Mm,
Immediately thrown into a world, and I'm sure this exists in other worlds too, it's just the one I know. Immediately you find yourself in a place in which everyone is trying to do the same thing, and we're all measuring our value off of each other, our social value, our intrinsic value, off of what I have done and what you have done. And pretty much you go to a party or a place or get together, and immediately people start giving their resumes, and immediately
hmm.
people start going through the list of what they've done. And they do it kindly, but we all feel that desire to do that because they want to establish ourselves as valuable in this world. And so comparison is a really hard thing to deal with there, because there's always going to be someone. I talk about this in the book I have coming out after a while, but it's, you go to an audition and you see for a particular role, and you see maybe 5 or 6 different versions of you, all of which are better. Some of them are thinner, some of them are fit, some are taller, some of them are better actors. And so you
Mm,
live in this constant world of comparison, which is really, really hard. And I guess another really difficult thing about Hollywood is that, I don't say this in a judgmental way, but it's moralless. It doesn't have a moral compass. And so very
hmm.
often you find yourself having to, with these moral quandaries of deciding, is this something that my values line up with? Is this something I want to be a part of? Is this something I can support and be in? Because very often the messages and the things coming from Hollywood, I believe, are really destructive. And it's hard for me, when I book a role or get an audition, to see the possibility of success there, of attention and furthering my career, but then realizing it's not a project that I can be a part of that would sit well with my heart and a man who desires to follow God. And so, and as a result of that, I still often see just the result of the morallessness there. I see so many people who are hurt and exploited and abused because people very often see actors and producers or anyone else as not as humans, not as humans with intrinsic value, that were made in the image of God, but people to be exploited or used. And as a result, so many people are, and it makes me really sad. And so it is hard to live in a world in which God has been asked to leave, essentially.
Mm.
So that was definitely part of my journey that I had to figure out. And how do I incorporate God and keep on following him in a place that doesn't care about him and even is antagonistic very often towards him or makes fun of him? And so that was definitely part of my journey as an actor in Hollywood, is who am I in God, and how do I follow him in a place that doesn't like him?
Right, right. Yeah, that would be definitely challenging, I think. And like you said, kind of soul searching, like figuring out
Yeah,
how do I reconcile this with who, I feel like God's calling me to be. And yeah, that's really, really good. And maybe we can talk more when we get into kind of your book and things that you've written about
absolutely.
that. So curious to hear also the highlights. What have been some of like the best highlight moments in your journey so far?
Yeah. Oh man, there's so many. This is just evidence of what I kind of always say to young actors. It doesn't come success and arriving doesn't come in one big moment. It happens in a million small moments over the years. I look back and see so many different ways that I was so blessed to have just a small thing. So a lot of times when I look back, the things I remember that were most exciting for me were very small parts. Like there's one part in a TV show called Community on NBC, and it was one line. And when I say one line, it was one word.
Nice.
Um, but it was my very first time though, and I can just remember being so ecstatic because for so long I had been in the background, and finally the camera was on me. It was on me for about a half a second, but it was on me, and
Right.
I remember that moment being kind of a real highlight, as like I felt like it was my first step into really getting to be in front of the camera. And my line was "look," and if you go back and watch the first season, you find me. You win 10 points, but it's something that I still get notes about it all the time, every year, just dozens and dozens of notes. Hey, I saw you in Community, which is so funny, and it was my very first thing, and it was so short, but it was so fun to finally feel like I was a part of that whole world. So that was definitely one of the highlights very early on. I think another highlight was when I got to make my own movie. When I it had been kind of this long stretch of either not getting roles or the ones I would get, I didn't feel peace about being a part of, and so I was kind of confused. I'm like, God, do you want me here? Is this something you want me doing? And I kind of felt that it was time for me to start telling my own stories, the ones that were on my heart, the ones that could reflect the things that I love and think are true and beautiful in the world. And so I got to write my very first script. And, I go back and watch this. It is not a perfect movie. There's so many mistakes. There's so many things I would change now. But that's part of being an artist. You have to start off small. You have to be okay knowing that your first movie will not be your best movie, but it is
Hmm.
to your best movie. And so I go back and look at that with a lot of joy that I was able to do that. That was a really big moment when I got to write a movie and then see it come to life, see my words and the visions in my head come to life. And of course, it came to life in a totally different way than I saw, but it was good. And then eventually I got to go to Walmart and see a copy of the movie that I had written and acted in. And my face was on the cover of, I got to go pick that up. Not in a prideful way, but in a way that I felt like, oh, I made something and maybe some other people will see it. I made something that I want to connect with people, and I'm hoping that other people will see it. So that was definitely a really big thing in my life. And there's just a million little things like that. It could be as small as doing really well as an audition, as big as, getting to work with, I got to work with Will Smith once in a skit for
Oh,
Jimmy
cool.
Kimmel show. Yeah, and I got to meet him, and he was in. They always say never meet your heroes, but in the case of Will Smith, I say by all means meet him. I played. He was a basketball coach in just a skit on a late night show, and but I was expecting him to have the star treatment because I've seen that before, where stars don't look us in the eye, they don't talk to anyone, and unfortunately that can be very true. But when Will Smith came on, he took a picture with every single person. He stayed around for an extra hour signing autographs, taking pictures. He was kind to the shyest person, to the most important person. And that just really was a moment when I saw real goodness and a kind of an example of what I would like to be should I ever find any kind of success. It was real humility. And humility is such a part of what Jesus has asked us to be. And so I saw that so displayed well. So that was definitely a highlight too. And just a million little moments like that. But that's definitely one.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love stories like that and really neat to see just, yeah, like you said, it's not necessarily like out of pride in a negative way, but just kind of, seeing the fruit of the work and the labor that you've put in over the years. So,
Absolutely.
and that's actually a really good, I feel like, segue into talking about your production company. So, what was that journey like getting started? Did you have to like rent equipment? What did that look like getting into your
Yeah.
own production company?
It looks like me having no idea what I was doing, but kind of just by a leap of faith going, okay, well, I want to do this and I want to jump in. And then another thing that it really looked like, and this is something I have learned the hard way, but also such a great thing for, I hope, the artists can take, especially young ones, is you realize, like I said earlier, because growing up with mental illness and learning disabilities, I knew very quickly what I wasn't good at. And artistically, we want to be good at everything. We want to control everything and do everything, especially when we're making our movie. But very quickly, you learn that the art of making a movie isn't like writing a book or painting a picture. The art of making a movie incorporates so many other people. Quickly have to say, I know I'm good at this, but I'm going to have to let go of control to let this person be good at what they're good at. And so I learned that very quickly. And I learned, you know what? I'm so glad that there are people in my life. I can admit that I'm not good at the business side. So I'm so glad that I have my friend here who can help me with this. And I'm so glad that, I can admit that I don't know much about cinematography, but I'm so glad that I can hand this off to a person who does. And so that kind of started in me realizing that I had to do that. And because I'd been in Hollywood for a few years and really gotten to know through church, through networking, through working with people, really talented people, I was able to, and this speaks to relationships too, is keep relationships, make a good name for yourself. Don't be someone who's hard to work with, because you might need and want to work with someone someday. And so I was able to go back through a lot of really talented people I had met throughout the few years I'd been in LA. And I was able to say, hey, would you help me make a movie? And they did. And so I would like to take all the credit, but really it was, if I did anything right, it was really just letting go of control and letting other people come in and do what they're good at. That's still true today. So logistically, it looks like me hiring a director who I knew would be good and who I knew had the vision for it, me doing a Kickstarter and trying to raise money on there, just enough to pay for food for the crew. And it looks like us guerrilla shooting, which is just getting in a van and jumping out and shooting something in a park. And you have to kind of, I tell young filmmakers, is you have to do what you can with what you have. Of course, I wanted to make The Lord of the Rings my first time out, but I knew that I had a couple DSLR cameras and not a lot of money. So we wrote a simple story and we filmed it in simple places, but it's learning to kind of do what you can with what you have. The verse about those who are faithful with little will be faithful in much. I think this is true in filmmaking and acting and artistry as well. You have to have humility in the beginning to show God that you can be faithful with the small amount He's given you. And so that's what that movie was. All right, I have almost no money and nothing, but I will make what I can with what I have. So I did. So that's kind of what it looked like. And somehow it came together little by little, shot by shot. And yeah, so that's kind of the origin story of the production company. And since then, I've been able to produce 2 others and a couple of short films, and we've gotten our films on Netflix and Prime. And it's been really just an amazing process of, again, learning to work with other amazing people, learning to let go of control, learning to have wisdom, learning to pray your way through everything you're doing, listening to the kinds of stories you want to see to tell. That was definitely a big part of it. But yeah, and so today we're on our 3rd movie, literally working on it right now, which is so much fun because we're looking at we're close to distribution offers, and it looks like we might just get this out for Christmas. But it's a Christmas story, and so this is our 3rd movie. But we're really excited. But it's been such a fun part of the whole world to be a part of actually making the stories, not just acting them, even though acting is my passion. It's been neat to be able to shape some of the stories I get to act in. And of course I act in them because I do great in my audition for myself.
Right. There's less pressure there when it's, for yourself. So
yeah, exactly.
Love it. Yeah, that's so good. I think that's really good truth, no matter what industry you're in or where you're living, is just that being willing to kind of let go of control a little bit and, have help from people that are all around you and, build that community. I think that's super key. Even like in the job that I do with directing it, it's easy to try to take control of everything and be, because it's like, well, I know what I want to have happen, and it may not look the way I want if somebody else does it, but it doesn't mean it's just not just as good, or it could end up even better. There's some quote I feel like that's like, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together or go with others, or something like that. That's such a good quote.
Yes, you nailed it. Yes, absolutely.
Yes, so good. So yeah, I would love to hear, because I just don't really know, because I'm not in the production world, but what is the process of creating a film look like, kind of the steps along the journey?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. A lot of filmmakers and writers and artists in general talk about their process. And I think the interesting thing about art in general and creativity in general is that processes look so different for so many different people, and like we talked about the law world or the medicine world, there is this very structured kind of straightforward step-by-step that you take to achieve the goal. And I think with many creative industries and outlets, it's a little more mysterious along the way. There are, of course, certain checkpoints that kind of guide us along the way, but very often, especially when it comes to just writing the script, I think a lot of people do it in so many different ways. For me, it's something that I will let marinate for a year in my head, and then all of a sudden I'll write it in 2 weeks. And for other
Nice.
people, they work on a script for 4 or 5 years and perfect every line. And I'm someone who just wants to get it out and let's just try to throw it out there. And everyone works differently. But as far as getting a movie, once you've written the script and once you have, hired your crew and worked with your friends to film it, getting it, from the in your head or even on your computer to on Netflix or in Walmart, it's looking to partner basically you take your movie and you look to partner with a distributor. And there's 1,000 distributors out there. And so you always have to be careful. You're working with a reputable one. And that can be a really hard journey of pitching your film and not hearing emails back and trying this person and getting to know and this. But, I do think that if you have honed your craft, I think if you have made a good story, even if you don't have star names, and I think that distributors will see the potential it could have and people will want to see it. So make sure you have a good story before you go into filming and make sure that it really looks good and as professional as you can be. And then you take it to distributors and they will take it and they kind of put it out in the world for you. And so it's kind of like book publishing in that sense. You get a publisher and they put your words out there in the world for you. It's definitely a confusing one. There's a lot of details and contracts and little things that I'm so bad at, but I've had really good people to guide me along the way, and I still do. But yeah, as far as the creative process before all that begins, it is interesting to me. I was thinking about this the other day, how different everyone approaches are. And that can be a scary thing because I think humans like formulas sometimes because they can give us safety and confines and direction, whereas creativity has less formula. And anyone who tells you that there is a formula for creativity, I think might be wrong. Of course, there's good practices. I'm not saying that. Right. But I think that we are all created differently and uniquely, and we're all going to approach creativity and art in different ways. And I think that's kind of the beautiful part about it. It's scary, but it's beautiful in the way that we approach creating art.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's good to have that open-mindedness and open-handed, approach to it. And it's so true. It's different for everyone. And I find that even in my process with podcasting, and we actually can talk about that too. But, it's like basically whatever I find inspiration to do at the moment, like whether that's editing or if it's creating some sort of, artwork or whatever, and kind of just rolling with the inspiration while it's there. And then it all gets done. And then if there is a deadline, you make it happen. And yeah,
absolutely.
Totally. If you've listened to the past few episodes, you've heard me mention the Root Collective. The Root Collective is a company that makes beautiful shoes and bags with a purpose. After working for a Fortune 500 company, the founder of the Root Collective, Bethany Tran, decided she wanted to make a difference by helping to create jobs for artisans in Guatemala. If you're getting a head start on your Christmas shopping this year, I would highly recommend supporting companies like the Root Collective who are making a positive impact and operating with integrity. Would handcrafted flats, boots, or a beautiful leather bag from the Root Collective work for someone on your list? The best part is that every purchase creates jobs for artisans who need them. Join me in making a difference through our shopping this holiday season. To learn more about the story behind the Root Collective and to check out their products, go to creativeimpactpodcast.com/RC. That's creativeimpactpodcast.com/RC, which stands for Root Collective. You can also check out more resources on our website. Just click on Resources. Now back to my conversation with Nathan. You were saying you are an author, so we'll get to that in just a second as well. But I think it's super cool that you're co-hosting a podcast, right?
Yes. And we kind of spoke about this before we started recording. This is something that definitely came out of a little bit of boredom during the quarantine. Yeah. And I didn't have a whole lot of creative outlets. It was a lot of busy work and I needed something to kind of spark that place in my mind again and allow me to be creative and get to talk through ideas. And also, quarantine has been really isolating. And so my friend Joseph and I, before this all began, we would go to movies and we would talk about books and afterwards we talk about them and dissect them, talk about the philosophy and culture and art. And we do that weekly. We'd see each other all the time and just spend hours just talking about these things. So when the quarantine rolled around and we couldn't go and see movies together, we couldn't go to a bookshop and talk about things anymore. there was definitely a lack there. And I was looking like, I missed that. I missed having those conversations and being challenged and thinking about things. And so basically to combat the lack of community and the lack of mental stimulation that quarantine brought along, we decided, why not start a podcast we can get on and we can talk about all the things that we love, whether it's art, whether it's faith, whether it's film or philosophy and culture, all these things that interest us and that we think are the important big questions. And so we just started saying, every week, let's get on and let's talk about things, the things that we really love and we think are important to talk about. And so we did. And so we've been doing it. This was a quarantine-born podcast, and it has just been really amazing to, this little project that we did just really for fun. We've built up this really kind of amazing small community of people who are also interested in this, and they're really dedicated, and it's growing every day. We really can't believe the response we've had to it, but it's been such an amazing process, and it's been really rewarding, and it's just been a real lifesaver in the quarantine, the lockdown. I'm in New York, so I'm locked down really, really extremely for so long, and so it's been a really life-saving thing that just even once a week have this rhythm of community and stimulation of the mind and the heart that really has meant a lot to me. So that's kind of what it's born out of. And it's called The Overthinkers, because both of us realize that we overthink everything, but we don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And so we talk about the things that we overthink and we think everyone should overthink.
Nice. That's super fun. Yeah, I got to listen to a snippet of it before we talked today, and it sounds like a lot of fun, and it's just great. Kind of reminds me of like conversations, I don't know, at least for me in my college experience, you kind of have that close-knit community, and you're always kind of hanging out and talking about, what is the worldview behind this? And
totally.
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, super fun. Y'all should all check it out, called The Overthinkers. And yeah, so fun. And I resonate as well with the quarantine podcast. That's definitely how this kind of got rolling as well. So super fun. Yeah, it's neat seeing the different creative projects that are popping up out of quarantine and this whole pandemic and everything. Even amidst all the crazy, there's been some bright spots for sure. And some
I think sometimes the most creative works and sometimes the best work comes out of the most suppression, the most depression, the most quarantine. There, of course, a quote going around about how Shakespeare wrote one of his best plays during the quarantine that he faced. So it is interesting. I don't think this is how we should always live by any means, but I do think that good things can come out of bad times for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. So I'd love to hear more about your recent book. So how long ago did it release?
It came out in early May. Yeah, the book is called Good Man, and it's a book I never really thought I would write. I wanted to be the cool arts guys talking about philosophy and faith, and I never thought I'd write a book about men and what it's like to be a man. But interestingly enough, I was in Hollywood. I was living in Hollywood when I started writing this book, and this book came out of a lot of different aspects. One being, what is a good man is a question I've been asking myself for as long as I can remember. What does it look like to be a good man? What does it look like to be a man after God's own heart, and especially in an age that doesn't seem to care or forgot what good men are. And it also came out of a place of me having seen such negative and terrible and destructive views of men in Hollywood. I would see this on a firsthand basis very often. And that really kind of brought this question again for me that had been present through all my life, because I saw how destructive living as I did say bad man, but I saw how destructive men could be. And I saw it regularly in Hollywood. I saw regularly the destructive aspect and how it hurt people and how it brought destruction to the world. And so I wanted to ask myself, am I a part of any destruction? Am I doing anything in my life? Am I lacking anything in my life that would not just not make me hurt the world, but actually help me help the world? Am I being who God has called me to be? So it is really a journey for me of going back and looking, who were men created to be? And I think the only way we know what something is created for is to go to the creator himself. And so it's a book. It's very honest. It's very raw. It's not it's not a Bible study. It's not an academic book. It's a storybook, and it has all my very raw, personal, sometimes uncomfortably so stories in it about my journey of discovering what is a good man. And it was inspired both my desire to be a good man and my observations of what happens to the world when men don't have that desire to be a good man. And so that's kind of the new book. And I'm really passionate about it and have been so blessed that a lot of people have connected to it as well.
Yeah, for sure. So did you do any sort of like book tour with that and kind of get to go out and talk about it with people, or has it been more just kind of release it into the world and see what happens kind of deal?
It was funny. We had a whole thing planned, try to get in the talk shows. I'm going to do a tour, do signings. And it came out right in the middle of COVID.
Oh, that's
Like
true. I didn't
right
even
during
think about that.
the lockdown. So it was definitely quite a faith experience having my very first solo book come out during this pandemic when no one really cared about books. But it was definitely a walk of faith of going, okay, so I guess I can still do this. And I guess, God, you have a plan or a purpose for this. And it was really cool to see him work through it. So pretty much the way I got in the world is being on podcasts like yours. I just had such amazing people come around me and ask me on to talk about it. And I think this is a subject that touches us all, that about men and being a good man, because we all either are a man or know a man. And
Yeah.
and I think the world is definitely affected by the actions of men and could benefit from more good men. And we have definitely seen, to the world's detriment, the actions of weak men. And so I think this is a subject that really has touched a lot of people. So it was amazing to see so many podcasts and radio shows and things that I could do right from my little living room right here, ask
Right.
me to talk about this. So it has been a really fun experience. It was not the one I expected or envisioned, like all artistic creations, but it was such a wonderful experience to be able to talk about this with people. And it's so neat to me to see that this connects with so many people's experience.
Yeah, for sure. Just thinking back to your journey writing the book, are there a few key elements that you feel like stand out for what does that look like being a man after God's heart, and what are some of those key elements, I guess?
Yeah, well, I go through every chapter. All the chapters are an aspect of who I think and what I think good men need to invest in, where I think God has asked us to grow, to look to. But they're not the things that I think a lot of, it's not just be good. It's not moralistic rules. It's more heart issues. How do we turn our heart towards the things of God, towards who we're meant to be? And there are things like wisdom. How do we become wiser? How do we cultivate a mind and a vision to look at the world in a way that comes back with truth? There's tenderness. There's how do we become men who are tender? How do we become men who are loving like Jesus was? How do we become more authentic? Authentic is something that we hear a lot. It's a buzzword, but I rarely feel like we see very often. I feel like it's used to sell foods and commercials and sell things, but I rarely feel like we see really true authenticity displayed. And I think that's
Yeah,
such an
that's so
important
good.
aspect of a good man. And so I explore kind of the things that I feel like a lot of maybe books and sermons haven't explored, who men were created to be. I think, there's a lot of images that come into our mind, a lot of them made from movies, of what a real man, a good man is, whether it's an action movie star or superhero. But I think to see a vision of the man we ought to be, it's Jesus. And I think he is both stronger and more tender than any of us can imagine. And that's comfortable for any of us. He is more graceful and more law abiding than any other that's been comfortable for any of us to look at. So there's a lot of dichotomy. It's definitely a mystery in how to do that. Definitely a process of authenticity that was scary in telling these stories. But I think without being authentic, without being honest, I don't think it could ultimately connect to people. And I really wanted this to connect to people. And so I tried to make sure that as I told these stories, I did it in a very honest and authentic way, that I wasn't holding back or trying to look like something, that I was speaking as a human person with desire to follow God, but who had faults and fears and doubts and failures. And I feel like that's kind of how we have to approach art as well. The most effective art is the most human. So that's what I tried to do as I wrote my book.
That's so good. And I think that authenticity is key for sure. I love that you're saying, like, we talk about it a lot, but we don't actually see it very often. I think that's
Yeah,
so true. Yeah. I think that's great to be encouraging, spurring each other on towards those things, wisdom and
absolutely.
authenticity. Yeah. So, so good. I'm excited to look into it more and kind of hear more about the book. I saw the book trailer. It looked really cool on your website. So we'll
Oh,
have to share
thank
that
you.
as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love it.
Yeah, super cool. It's very epic. I love it.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah. And then the other books that you co-authored with your mom about just like growing up and how that
Yeah.
was for you. Do you want to share just a little bit maybe of your
Yeah.
story? And obviously people can pick up the book as well and kind of read more, but a little bit of your story and how that plays into your life right now.
Absolutely. Well, the very first book I wrote was called Different, and I did write it with my mom. The book is about my journey as a kid being outside the box personality and mind and heart, having mental illness, diagnosed at a very young age, having very many learning disabilities that were playing against me, and just an out of the box personality in general. And what it was like to be that kid who had all these struggles, what it was like to experience life in that way, feeling alone, feeling not good enough, feeling less than, and sometimes feeling like you were too much, and what it was like experiencing that as a kid. And then it goes from my perspective to her perspective, and what it was like raising a kid like that, what it was like loving a kid like that, and how she had to listen to God in the process of raising a kid like that. And I'm really thankful I had the mom I did, because it is really, truly the reason I'm living the creative life I am today.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, I think very many kids are asked to fit, especially in today's culture, fit into a mold, fit into what you're supposed to look like, how you're supposed to learn. We're supposed to fill out a test, and that is kind of how we're valued.
Right. There's all these like standards, certain standards that we're supposed to fit. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's cookie cutter. It's do this, this is this, you are this. And, you know, I think if I had been born into a lot of other families, I would have grown up feeling dumb. I already struggled with that in school outside of my family. But I think, you know, in the family is the most potent effect that it has on your life. And for me, I think I would have felt very dumb and uninspired, and like I would never amount to anything had I been born into many other families. But in mine, my mom saw that I was intelligent, I was passionate, that I had dreams and vision, and it might not look like my brothers and sisters, it might not look like the other kids or what the standardized testing told me it looked like, but she saw that I loved stories and acting. So she, in trusting God, encouraged me into the man I was created to be. And so the book is about our journey through that, and what it was like being a mom and being a kid, and what it was like being different. And I will say this, while my differences are very loud and they're very obvious, my mental illness, my learning disabilities, my personality, I think everyone is different in some way or another. Mine are easily identifiable, but I think that all of us have felt different, have felt too much or not enough at some point in our life.
That's so true, yeah.
And I think especially for creatives and artists, they need to know that their differences are things that God can use, and the differences are things that God will use should you let him, and they're good and they're beautiful.
Yeah, that's so good. I love it. Yeah, so as we kind of look towards, and that really speaks a lot to artists, I feel like, as well. Is there something that you feel like right now in this season that you would want to share with artists? Like imagining we're just sitting across the table at a coffee shop with them, you know, people that are listening, anything that you want to share?
Yeah. You know, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I've been thinking about, you know, I just turned 30.
Me too. Nice.
30, well, I'm 31 now. I just turned,
okay.
But I turned 30 a couple of years ago, and that was like this kind of big changing moment. And I was like, oh my goodness.
It feels like, whoa, we're like actually adulting now, you know?
Yeah, I have to like actually, be an adult, and I don't necessarily feel like adult.
Right.
But so that's been a lot. I've had a lot of introspection over the past years and what I've learned in my life, especially my creative life. And I'd say if I was speaking to young artists, if I was speaking to my young self, there's a few things I would tell my young self and young artists. Is one, I mentioned this earlier, but success and arriving is a process and a direction. It is not one big moment. Don't wait for that one big moment. Take and celebrate the small moments along the way, and let them be building blocks towards something great as you walk there. But it's not going to happen in one moment. So that's a line you cross. And that goes hand in hand with humility. Allow yourself to approach your dreams with humility. I think some of us think that we need to be the best, we need to be the greatest, and that we need to only go over, you know, I talk about extra work. And a lot of people, I've heard a lot of young actors like, I'm not going to do extra work. I'm going to wait till I get a real role. Like, why would you do that? Because extra work is such an important place to, one, I think it does humble you, and it shows you how to respect and see and honor those in positions above you. But I think it also gives you an education to humble yourself in your art, but also have courage in your art. So on the flip side, have courage in your creativity, in your art. No one started off doing exactly what they're doing. My first movie is not my best movie. There's a million mistakes. And I go back and I cringe and go, what was I thinking doing that? I still cringe when I see an acting performance. I go, why did I make that choice? But have courage. We're all going to make mistakes.
Right. We all have to start somewhere. Exactly.
Exactly. You have to start somewhere. So while I say be humble, also be brave. Be brave to just jump in, but take a leap of faith and just give it a try. No one, and I know it feels scary, and there's all that comparison like I talked earlier, and I know that there's all these people going to be better than you and who make you insecure, but until you just try and start working out that muscle, it'll never happen. So have courage. The last one is take the time to get good at what you love to do. It's not enough just to have dreams or natural talent or vision or even just desire. Desire can only be realized with action. And this goes, hand in hand with the last one, but really take the time to become good at what you're doing. I think that sometimes Christians can, and I say this with love, but sometimes we can accept bad work because, we're Christian but I think that God is a God of beauty. That you look at the universe that He's created and it's beautiful, it's excellent. And I think that He has called us to be excellent too. And so if we are going to go and be in places like Hollywood, then we need to be the best actors. Why? Because we serve a God who's the best artist. And so take the time to hone your skills, to get good at them, to get training, to get experience. And so pretty much all of my suggestions kind of have something to do with each other, because that is really the only way that we'll ultimately really be able to realize in a full way what God has called us to do.
Love that so much. Yeah. Thank you for just sharing those bits of experience and wisdom that you've gained over your time in Hollywood and in different experiences throughout your life. And this is not totally random. But one question that I'm just curious of is, as artists, we're definitely all sort of storytellers in our own way, whether it's through choreography or through painting or through acting, whatever it may be. And with your acting background, I'm just curious, what's some advice that you would give on effectively telling stories and getting story across? Any thoughts you want to share? Little tidbits?
Oh, yeah. I have, it's definitely a process, and I've learned, and I still am learning over the years of how to effectively act, how to be a good actor. And, there's one saying that I learned in acting school when I was a teenager that really has stuck with me. And it's, acting is living realistically under imaginary circumstances. And I think that's what it is. I think the most connective, the best performances you'll ever see is the people who are living the most realistic way they possibly can. They're not acting, they're not putting on performance, they're actually reacting, they're actually living in that moment, they're actually reacting to the circumstances they've been given. It's definitely hard, and this is hard when you have cameras and crew all around, but inhabit that character. Think about how a human would think, because I think that's going to be the performance that will ultimately connect to people when they see it. The performances that I felt like I have done the best were the ones where I had most been able to live in the world that I was given and live into the character that I was given and react like a human would, not perform, not try to get laughs or to manipulate emotion somehow, but to just act authentically in the circumstances I was given. So that has been the best advice I have received, and it's still something that guides me today.
Yeah, it's great guiding advice. So one thing I like to ask all my guests is, what is one of your favorite things right now?
Well, I have had probably way too much time to watch movies, read books, and play video games during this quarantine. And so I have so many things that come to mind as you say that. So one of my favorite things right now, let me think. Oh, there's a few.
You could give more than one if you want.
Okay, good. I think I really loved going back through, and I mentioned this earlier, going back through the series of Community. This was written in such a clever, interesting way, and it got really to the heart of humans and how we are and how we act and how we think. Of course, it's written by a man who doesn't have faith, but you can still see his longing for faith and for purpose and for meaning in it, and it's just fun and it's interesting, and it was really fun coming across the episode with my bit in it. So that
the
was
debut line.
It's such a exactly that the starting of the career. So I really enjoyed that. I have read so many good books during this quarantine. Let me see I want to make sure I get the title right. It's
been fun having time to read more lately.
Oh yeah. Isn't that it's just wonderful. This book, okay, I got it. This book really has been formative as I philosophically think about creativity and how God created us to create, creator. And the book is by Madeleine L'Engle. She is the one who also wrote A Wrinkle in Time, and it's called Walking on Water.
Yes.
And it's written to artists, for artists and creators, and it's just really an amazing, amazing book. And then my last love would be, well, I don't know if it's a love, but it's a really fun game that's just really artistic and clever. And it's a video game called Hello Neighbor, and it's totally puzzles, mind, and it really works out that logic side of you. But I've spent hours trying to figure these things out. It's just really fun. So those are a few of my favorite things right now that I've just really enjoyed and been engaging in that on the creative side.
Yes, that's so fun. I'll have to look up that game. That sounds cool. It sounds pretty fun with the different logic elements to it. Yes. Well, I would love to direct people where they can connect with you and, pick up a copy of your books or, find your films, that kind of thing. So where's the best place for them to connect in?
Absolutely. So you can connect to me on all social media. Just search my name, Nathan Clarkson. You can go to my website at nathanclarkson.me. I love getting messages from people. I love hearing from you. So please drop me a line and I'll try to get back. I just love connecting with great and creative people. You can get any of my books or movies on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble, pretty much anywhere books and movies are sold. You can get my books and movies. So just search my name, Nathan Clarkson, and you can find some of my work. And so that's where you can find me. Please reach out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been a super inspiring time. I love getting to chat about art and hear more about an industry that I'm less familiar with. It's been really fun to learn. And thank you just for sharing your time and your wisdom with us and just spending this hour together. It's been really fun.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It really was an honor.
It was so fun getting to know Nathan and hear more about his story. I appreciated his honesty and also his encouragement to stay humble and walk with courage in our calling as artists. You can find links from the show in the full show notes on our website. Are you interested in supporting the show? Check out our Patreon community. As a supporter of the podcast, you get access to extra content that is only available for patrons. You can learn more at creativeimpactpodcast.com/Patreon. Next week on the show, I catch up with Amanda Browning. Amanda is a professional dancer and is heavily involved in the fitness community. She runs her own virtual health and fitness business from home and is a wife and mother of 4. Get ready to be inspired. Thank you so much for listening to the Creative Impact Podcast. The music for the show was produced by Michael Cash. Don't forget to check out creativeimpactpodcast.com/thankful and let us know why you are grateful for the arts. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our weekly newsletter to enter for your chance to win the giveaway. Share the show with a friend, and I'll see you next week for my conversation with Amanda Browning.